The air in the 42nd floor boardroom was a cocktail of ambition, fear, and expensive cologne. It hung heavy, reflecting the weight of the manila envelope in my hand. Inside lay not just a document, but the culmination of 3 years of simmering rage, sleepless nights, and the meticulous unraveling of a corporate titan's dirty secrets. Marcus, my boss, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, oblivious to the digital guillotine I held. He was mid-sentence, pontificating on synergy and shareholder value, his voice a smooth, calculated drone. But to me, his words were the soundtrack to my undoing, the relentless beat of a drum that had orchestrated my humiliation and near destruction. I was Alina, a woman who had climbed from the dust to the gleaming heights of corporate America, only to find the view from the top tainted by the very person who was supposed to be my mentor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird desperate for release. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment I would expose his lies and reclaim my stolen dignity. But then, a subtle warmth against my coat pocket, a simple, unexpected presence, began to whisper a different narrative. The fluorescent lights of the boardroom weren't just bright, they were surgical. They caught the sweat on my palms as I gripped the manila envelope that held the power to burn a $400 million merger to the ground. 3 years. That's how long I'd waited for this. 3 years of Marcus taking credit for my strategies while making jokes about my modest background, over $200 steaks I wasn't invited to eat. 3 years of him hiding his offshore accounts while he slashed our department's pensions. "Is there a problem, Alina?" Marcus sneered from the head of the table. He didn't even look up from his iPad. "Or are you just having another one of your episodes?" The board members chuckled, a low, rhythmic sound that felt like a death knell. My heart was a drum in my ears. I looked at the envelope. Inside was the forensic audit, the proof that Marcus hadn't just been greedy, he'd been criminal. I was seconds away from sliding it across the mahogany table and watching the color drain from his face. This was it. My career would be over, but his life would be ruined. Total, scorched-earth revenge. I felt a strange weight in my coat pocket. It was the sourdough loaf I'd grabbed from the little bakery on the corner 10 minutes ago. Old man Elias had handed it to me for free when I realized I'd left my wallet in the office. "You look like you're carrying the world, child," he'd said with that quiet, devastating kindness. "Eat, rest, the world can wait for a hungry soul." I looked at Marcus. He was a difficult individual, but as I reached for the envelope, the warmth of the bread against my hip felt like a hot coal. My hand started to shake. I could expose him right now. I could end it all. To truly grasp the magnitude of that moment in the boardroom, you must understand the journey that led me there. My story wasn't born from privilege or gilded opportunities. I grew up in a town where the factory closed in '98 and never reopened, leaving behind a landscape of dashed hopes and economic hardship. My mother, a woman of fierce spirit and even fiercer determination, worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I, in turn, worked 2 while pursuing my MBA, fueled by an insatiable drive to escape the cycle of scarcity. When the offer from Sterling and Croft landed, it felt like salvation. The gleaming glass towers, the promise of innovation, the chance to finally build a life free from constant worry, it was everything I had dreamed of. But the dream quickly soured. Marcus, with his tailored suits and condescending smirk, was a different kind of challenge. He didn't just overlook my contributions. He actively undermined them, subtly twisting narratives to claim my successes as his own. He would call at odd hours for trivial matters, implicitly demanding my constant availability. He'd forget to include me in crucial emails for projects I spearheaded. Each instance chipped away at my confidence, eroding the hard-won belief in my own capabilities. The constant professional slight was one thing, a battle I'd been conditioned to endure. But the true turning point, the moment the seed of revenge took root, was deeply personal. 6 months prior to the boardroom confrontation, my mother, my anchor and my inspiration, passed away after a prolonged illness. I requested a mere 3 days off for the funeral, a time of profound grief and necessary farewell. Marcus's response was a chilling testament to his lack of empathy. He called me during the wake, not to offer condolences, but to inquire with an edge of impatience about the Q3 projections. "Life goes on, Alina," he'd said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Don't be dramatic." That callous remark shattered something fundamental within me. The pain of my loss intertwined with years of professional disrespect, crystallizing into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just working hard anymore, I was building a case. I started digging. Late nights bled into early mornings, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for justice. I learned about his offshore accounts, the cleverly disguised consulting fees flowing into shell companies, the pension fund manipulations. Each discovered piece of evidence was a morbid victory, a step closer to the inevitable reckoning. On the morning of the merger, I was a ghost. I hadn't slept a wink, the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on me like a physical burden. The forensic audit, meticulously prepared, was tucked under my arm, a weapon poised to fire. My steps were robotic, leading me toward the towering edifice of Sterling and Croft, a modern-day coliseum where I intended to bring down a giant. But then, a detour. A small, unassuming storefront, Elia's Hearth, caught my eye. It was a bakery that seemed to defy time, emanating warmth and a comforting aroma of freshly baked goods that felt like a whisper from a simpler world. Drawn by an unseen force, I entered, ordering a simple sourdough loaf, its rustic charm a stark contrast to the sterile documents I carried. When I reached for my wallet, a wave of panic washed over me. It wasn't there. Left on my desk, forgotten in the haze of my mission. A sob caught in my throat, a tiny, humiliating crack in my armor. It felt like the universe was conspiring against me, another reminder of my vulnerability, another moment of feeling not enough. But then, a voice. Elia's, a man whose hands were gnarled like ancient oak roots and whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 sunrises, simply smiled. He wrapped the bread in brown paper and pushed it gently across the counter. "It's on the house," Elia said, his voice soft but firm, cutting through my distress. I stammered. "I can't accept that. Everything has a price. I'll come back and pay." He shook his head, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Not kindness, child. If you live your life thinking everything is a transaction, you'll never be truly rich." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing but gentle. "You're going somewhere to do something hard, aren't you?" I nodded, stunned by his immediate insight. How could he know? "Don't let them make you like them," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The revenge you're seeking, it's a meal that fills the belly but starves the heart. Take the bread. Remember what it's like to receive something you didn't earn. Remember the taste of generosity, not just the pursuit of triumph." His words were a cool balm on my inflamed soul, a radical departure from the cutthroat philosophy that had defined my corporate existence. The warmth of the bread in my hands felt like a tangible representation of his wisdom, a quiet counterpoint to the cold, hard evidence in my briefcase. It was a moment of profound clarity, a tiny crack in the armor of my resolve for retribution. Back in the sterile confines of the boardroom, Marcus was losing patience. "Elena, if you don't have the files, leave." His demand hung in the air, a final challenge. I looked at the manila envelope, then at Marcus's arrogant, unyielding face. I saw the hunger in his eyes, not for food, but for power, for control, for perpetual self-aggrandizement. I realized that if I exposed him in the way I had planned, with a flourish of damning evidence, I was just playing his game. I was using his weapons, becoming a reflection of the very person I sought to destroy. That thought, sparked by Elia's simple act of kindness, was a jarring revelation. It shifted something deep within me. My goal had been justice, yes, but it had morphed into a desire for destruction, a hunger for his downfall that mirrored his own insatiable greed. And then, instead of sliding the envelope across the table, I pulled out the loaf of bread from my coat. The room went utterly silent. Marcus stared at the sourdough as if I'd pulled out a live grenade. "What is this?" he hissed, his composure finally cracking. "It's a gift," I said, my voice steady for the first time in what felt like years, resonating with a quiet authority that silenced the room. "Because you're starving, Marcus. You have millions and you're the hungriest man I've ever met. You're so hungry you've been stealing from the pension fund just to feel full." The temperature in the room plummeted. The lead director, a sharp, astute woman named Sarah, sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on me. "What did you just say, Elena?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. I didn't give them the audit directly then. Not yet. I looked at Marcus and I saw something flicker in his eyes, a raw, unadulterated fear. He knew I had it. He knew. "I'm resigning," I declared, the words feeling liberating as they left my lips. "Effective immediately. But before I go, I'm leaving this audit on Sarah's desk. Not because I want to destroy you, Marcus, but because the people who worked for those pensions deserve to eat too. They deserve justice, not just a spectacle of revenge. I walked over, placed the warm bread gently in front of a stunned Marcus, and then laid the manila envelope, with its damning contents, in front of Sarah. "The bread is for you, Marcus," I said, my gaze steady. "Try to remember what it tastes like when something is truly free." I walked out of that building a free woman, unburdened by the weight of corporate battles or the consuming fire of revenge. I had no job, no immediate plan, but a profound sense of peace. 3 weeks later, the news broke. Marcus was indicted on 13 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The merger collapsed, but the company was restructured under Sarah's leadership. She tracked me down, offering me Marcus's old office, a symbol of redemption and professional vindication. I politely declined. Today, I sit in Elia's hearth, not as a corporate ladder climber, but as an apprentice. My mornings are spent learning the ancient alchemy of flour and water, the subtle art of crafting life from simple ingredients. My afternoons are dedicated to helping Elias manage the books for a nonprofit organization that teaches financial literacy to young people in my hometown, the very place I once so desperately wanted to escape. I've come to understand that the best form of justice, and indeed, the most profound victory, isn't always about seeing your tormentor fall. It's about refusing to allow their toxicity to transform you into someone you don't recognize. It's about breaking the chain of resentment and choosing a path of creation over destruction. The free loaf wasn't just bread. It was a lesson in humanity, a reminder that true richness lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you give and in the quiet strength of your own integrity. Justice isn't always a hammer. Sometimes it's just a simple, honest loaf of bread, freely given, that redefines your purpose.